بيان حكم من يتلفظ بلفظ الكفر بغير سبق لسان. Clarification of the rule for anyone who pronounces an expression of blasphemy without a slip of the tongue. وَأَنَّهُ يَخْرُجُ مِنَ الْإِسْلَامِ, which is that that person exits Islam. إِنْ كَانَ غَيْرَ مُكْرَهٍ بِالْقَتْلِ وَنَحْوِهِ, if he were not compelled, forced to say the expression of blasphemy under a death threat or the like. We're still in this bayan, in this clarification, and we're going to continue from where the Sheikh says, وَأَمَّا بَعْضُ الْحَنَفِيَّةِ الْمَنْقُولُ عَنْهُمْ خِلَافُ هَذَا. Now, concerning some Hanafis, those whom what is documented about them is different from this, what we have said. I just read the title to you. مِمَّنْ هُمْ لَيْسُوا مِنْ أَهْلِ تَخْرِيجٍ. Some Hanafis who are not mujtahids in the madhab. بَلْ هُمْ مِنَ الْمُتَأَخِّرِينَ. Rather, they are latter-day figures. He means to say they don't have that very lofty status in the madhab. Not that someone who's latter day can't have a very lofty status. He could. But the goodness is in following the early scholars, the trailblazers amongst the scholars. بَلْ هُمْ مِنَ الْمُتَأَخِّرِينَ. Those who said different from what we are saying amongst the Hanafis. They are, rather than being mujtahids in the madhab, they are some latter-day ones. الَّذِينَ لَا يُنْظَرُ إِلَيْهِمْ فِي الْإِجْمَاعِ وَالْخِلَافِ. Amongst those whom they are not regarded when it comes to matters of consensus or difference in opinion, because their opinion is weightless. It has no value. Their opinion has no value, no consideration. So whatever they say is not going to contribute to a consensus or to a difference in opinion. وَلَا يُؤْخَذُ بِقَوْلِهِمْ إِلَّا أَنْ يَكُونُوا نَقَلُوا عَنِ الْإِمَامِ أَوْ أَصْحَابِ الْوُجُوهِ فِي الْمَذْهَبِ. And these ones, they have no taken saying. What they say is not taken, unless what they are saying is a documentation from the imam of the madhab or the mujtahids inside the madhab. فَلَا عِبْرَةَ بِرَأْيِهِمْ هَذَا. So there is no regard given to this opinion of theirs, that a person might say blasphemy without knowing the rule and then be yani. The rule is that a person would say blasphemy even without knowing the rule and be a blasphemer still. So there is no regard given to their opinion that goes against this rule. Who says blasphemy, explicit blasphemy, without a slip of the tongue? And although he doesn't know the rule that what he said is blasphemy, he still blasphemes. That's correct rule. فمن أمثال هؤلاء من قال مخالفا للإجماع. Some people of that status have said things against the consensus, like إنه لا يجوز أن يتزوج من ليس حسنيا أو حسينيا من هي حسنية أو حسينية إلا إذا خشي عليها مفسدة. They said someone who is not a descendant of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the lineage of Al-Hasan or Al-Hussein cannot marry a woman who is from the lineage of Al-Hasan or Al-Hussein unless he fears for her corruption. to sin if she doesn't marry. So this is wrong. When someone of such a low status in the madhab says something like this, then it has no regard. قلنا إن الصحابة أجمعوا على تصويب عمر بن الخطاب في تزوجه ابنة علي الشريفة كلثوم. We say, opposed to the saying, in opposition to the saying, the companions have a consensus that Umar was correct in marrying the daughter of Ali, Kulthum. وقال بعض من هم أعلى منه مرتبة في العلم. There have even been people who are higher in the knowledge who have said rejected sayings. Some who are even higher in knowledge, they said إنه يجوز الأكل في رمضان إلى طلوع الشمس. They said it's permissible to continue to eat in Ramadan until sunrise. During Fajr you can still eat. وهناك من قال بجواز وطئ الجارية المملوكة بإباحة مالكها لغيره. And there are even some high-ranking scholars who said another rejected saying that it's permissible for someone who has permission of a slave woman's master to have sexual intercourse with her. فهل ينظر إلى مثل هذا الخلاف أم يقال هو خلاف كالعدم? Would such an opposition be regarded? Or would it be that such an opposition is like nothing? The point Sheikh is making is, here are these two sayings about there being a saying that you can eat in Ramadan until the sun rises. You can eat in Fajr time in Ramadan until the sun rises. And a saying that if a slave master gives you permission, you can just have intercourse with his slave woman by mere virtue of his permission. These sayings were said actually by mujtahids, and these sayings are thrown away. So how about someone who's way lower? Would what he says that's against the evidence be regarded, or would it be like nothing? It would be like nothing. فلا يدفع قول هؤلاء قول المجتهدين المنوط بهم الإجماع والاختلاف. So what those low-ranking latter-day ones say would not debunk what the mujtahids said, those mujtahids whom consensus and difference in opinion is based on them. كما قال أبو بكر الخطيب البغدادي في كتابه الفقيه والمتفقه. Like Abu Bakr al-Khatib al-Baghdadi said in his book Al-Faqih wal-Mutafaqih, فَلِلْعُلَمَاءِ مَرَاتِبْ, because the scholars, they have levels. وَالْآرَاءِ وَالْأَقْوَالِ وَالْأَقْوَالُ مَرَاتِبْ, and the opinions and the sayings have levels. There's levels to these things. وَلَيْسَ كُلُّ الْعُلَمَاءِ فِي مَرْتَبَةٍ وَاحِدَةٍ, and not all of the scholars are of the same level. فَمَنْ كَانَ أَسِيرَ التَّقْلِيدِ فِي غَيْرِ مَحَلِّهِ تَاهَ فِي الْحَيْرَةِ. So whoever was a prisoner of misplaced imitation, then he's lost, and he's lost in confusion. Whoever is a prisoner of misplaced imitation, irresponsible imitation, then he's lost in confusion. Who's like that? Many people who really they don't know, and they take from people who don't know, and all of those people take from people who don't know. They're taking from each other, and each one is following what the other one is doing, and none of them know. Yani, imagine, for example, a community where each person looks and says, how do the people pray? I'll pray like they pray. And how do the people fast? And how do the people make wudu? I will do like they do. But all of them are doing that. So each one of them is just doing what everybody else is doing. So what would this be? This would be yani, the blind following the blind. And then if you were to tell them it's not like this, they would say, this is what everyone does. You must be mistaken. And some people are very arrogant. They have some source of knowledge and they think that they have something really not yani, they have some source for where they get their information. And they think they have access to knowledge and they don't listen. The Sheikh says, ويكفي في رد هذا أنه مخالف لما قال الإمام المجتهد. It's enough to refute this, that it is against what the Mujtahid Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani said. في من قال لمن رآه على معصية ظاهرة, concerning someone who said to someone else who was openly sinning. He said to someone who was openly sinning. Someone said to someone else who was openly sinning, ألا تخاف الله? Do you not fear God? فقال لا أخافه. He said, I do not fear God. What did Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani say? كفر ولا يمكن تأويله. He committed blasphemy, and there is no way to give it an alternative interpretation. Okay. The point, though, is if a person says a word of blasphemy without knowing that it's blasphemy, he still commits blasphemy. That's the point. Is that clear? It's not the point here whether one agrees with whether this is an explicit blasphemy that has no other way of explanation. That's not the point here. The point is that if someone commits blasphemy, if he says blasphemy, rather, if someone pronounces blasphemy without knowing that it's blasphemy, then he still blasphemes. That's the issue. قال الحافظ تقي الدين السبكي في فتاويه. Hafiz Taqiyuddin as-Subki said in his book of verdicts, his fatawa, ولا ينجيهم أي الخوارج اعتقاد الإسلام إجمالا. And for the Khawarij to have, in general, a conviction about Islam being the correct religion, وَالْعَمَلُ بِالْوَاجِبَاتِ, and for them to outwardly practice the obligations, praying and fasting, etc. This will not save them عَنِ الْحُكْمِ بِكُفْرِهِمْ, from being judged as disbelievers. كَمَا لَا يُنْجِي السَّاجِدَ لِلصَّنَمِ ذَلِكَ. Just like if someone were prostrating to an idol while believing in Islam as being the correct religion and being someone who prays and fasts. His believing in Islam being the right religion and being someone who prays and fasts will not save him from kufr if he prostrates to an idol. What's the meaning here? The meaning is if someone performs blasphemy, he will be a blasphemer, even if he believes Islam is the right religion, and even if he does the outward practices of Islam. نقل ذلك عنه الحافظ ابن حجر في فتح الباري. Hafiz ibn Hajar logged that about Taqiyuddin as-Subki in فتح الباري. ثم قال ابن حجر في الفتح ما نصه. Then Ibn Hajar, he said in فتح الباري, quote, قلت, I say, وممن جنح إلى بعض هذا البحث الطبري. And amongst those who engaged in this topic, who handled this topic, is At-Tabari في تهذيبه, in his book At-Tahdhib. فقال بعد أن سرد أحاديث الباب. He said, after listing the hadiths on the topic, يعني أحاديث الخوارج, meaning the hadiths about the Khawarij, he said, يعني he commented on the hadiths about the Khawarij. فيه الرد على قول من قال لا يخرج أحد من الإسلام من أهل القبلة بعد استحقاقه حكمه إلا بقصد الخروج منه عالما. These hadiths, يعني, in this there is refutation of anyone who said that no one goes out of Islam from the people of the Qibla after deservingly being judged with Islam unless he had a goal of exiting Islam with knowledge. So Tabari, he's from the Salaf. He's at the end of the Salaf. It's a mujtahid at-Tabari. And he's from the Salaf. That means old. This is old talk here. I'll repeat what he said. This mujtahid from the Salaf said, therein is refutation of anyone who said that no one goes out of Islam from the people of the Qibla after deservingly being judged with Islam unless he had the goal of going out of Islam knowingly. Saying that's refuted. That notion is refuted. فَإِنَّهُ مُبْطِلٌ لِقَوْلِهِ فِي الْحَدِيثِ, because saying that would actually debunk what the Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So if that debunks what the Prophet said, then it must be that that's false, not what the Prophet said. That notion would debunk what the Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in the hadith. يَقُولُونَ الْحَقِّ, they say the truth. وَيَقْرَؤُونَ الْقُرْآنِ, and they recite the Quran. وَيَمْرُقُونَ مِنَ الْإِسْلَامِ, and they go out of Islam. وَلَا يَتَعَلَّقُونَ مِنْهُ بِشَيْءٍ, and nothing of it sticks to them. وَمِنَ الْمَعْلُومِ أَنَّهُمْ لَمْ يَرْتَكِبُوا اسْتِحْلَالَ دِمَاءِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وأموالهم إلا بخطأ منهم فيما تأولوه من آي القرآن على غير المراد منه. He said, and it is known, yani, those people are kuffar, is what his point is. It's what the Prophet said, they are kuffar. And it's known that their situation is that they did not commit to legalizing the blood and money of Muslims except by a misinterpretation of verses of the Quran. What he's saying is their misinterpretation of verses of the Quran didn't save them from kufr. They still committed kufr. وقال أيضا, and he also said, وفيه أن من المسلمين من يخرج من الدين من غير أن يقصد الخروج منه. He also said, therein is evidence that there are Muslims who go out of Islam, they go out of religion without intending to go out of it. وَمِنْ غَيْرِ أَنْ يَخْتَارَ دِينًا عَلَى دِينِ الْإِسْلَامِ, and without choosing another religion over Islam. That's the shahid for us. That's what's relevant to our lesson. وأن الخوارج شر الفرق المبتدعة من الأمة المحمدية ومن اليهود والنصارى. And he's saying, and also therein is evidence that the Khawarij are the most evil of heretical sects from the Muhammadan nation and even from the Jews and the Christians. That's Tabari. All that talk is the talk of Tabari. Then Ibn Hajar comment. قلت, I say, والأخير مبني على القول بتكفيرهم مطلقا. The last part is based on saying that they are disbelievers without detail. ثم قال الحافظ ما نصه, then the Hafiz said, quote, قوله وقول الله تعالى, that author said, Allah said, إلا من أكره وقلبه مطمئن بالإيمان, except someone who was compelled under death threat, while his heart is firm with faith. That's 106th verse of Surah Al-Nahl, the bee. وَسَاقَ إِلَى عَظِيم, and He quoted the ayah until the end. So Ibn Hajar, he's quoting a scholar as if it's still a Tabari, and he produced the ayah, the 106th verse of Surah Al-Nahl, the 106th verse of Surah Al-Nahl, about the one who was compelled to say blasphemy under death threat. And so he quoted the entire ayah, هو وعيد شديد لمن ارتد مختارا. This verse has severe threat for anyone who committed apostasy willingly. وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ هُوَ مَعْذُورٌ. And as for anyone who was forced to do that, he's excused. بالآية. By the ayah excuses him. لأن الاستثناء من الإثبات لأن الاستثناء من الإثبات نفي فيقتضي ألا يدخل الذي أكره على الكفر تحت الوعيد. Because making an exception from a confirmation amounts to a negation. Yani, in the ayah, Allah threatens whoever commits blasphemy, but makes an exception for who was threatened. So that means that this threat is negated from the one who is threatened. So this dictates that the one who was threatened is not included under the threat. والمشهور أن الآية المذكورة نزلت في عمار ibn Yasir. And what's famous is that this mentioned verse of the Quran was revealed concerning Ammar ibn Yasir. كما جاء من طريق أبي عبيدة بن محمد بن عمار ibn Yasir. Like how it was reported from the route of Abu Ubaidah, son of Muhammad, son of Ammar ibn Yasir. قال أخذ المشركون عمارا. He said, the pagans caught Ammar فعذبوه حتى قاربهم في بعض ما أرادوا. And they tortured him until he did some of what they wanted. So then they let him go. فشكى ذلك إلى النبي. So then he complained about that to the Prophet, meaning when they let him go, he went to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. فقال له. And so the Prophet said to him, كيف تجد قلبك? How do you find your heart? قال مطمئنا بالإيمان. He said, tranquil with faith. قال فإن عادوا فعد. So the Prophet said to him, alayhi salatu wassalam, if they come back, then do it again. وهو مرسل. This hadith is reported from a follower of the companion without mention of his intermediary between him and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَرِجَالُهُ ثِقَاتٌ. But the men of the chain of the narration are trustworthy. أخرجه الطبري. Tabari produced this hadith. وَقَبْلَهُ عبد الرزاق. And before him, Abdul Razaq produced this hadith. وعنه عبد بن حميد. And from him, Abd ibn Humayd reported it. وأخرجه البيهقي من هذا الوجه. And Al-Bayhaqi reported it this way. فزاد في السند فقال عن أبي عبيدة بن محمد بن عمار عن أبيه. He said, this is reported from Abu Ubaidah, son of Muhammad ibn Ammar, from his father. وهو مرسل أيضا. But this is still a mursal report. The intermediary between the tabi'i and the Prophet is still missing here. وأخرج الطبري أيضا من طريق عطية العوفي عن ابن عباس نحوه مطولا. Also, Al-Tabari reported this from the route of Atiyah al-Awfi from Ibn Abbas in a similar way, but longer. وفي سنده ضعف. But there's weakness in its chain. وفيه أن المشركين عذبوا عمارا وأباه وأمه وصهيبا وبلالا وخبابا وسالما مولى أبي حذيفة. According to that version, The pagans tortured Ammar and his father and his mother and Suhaib and Bilal and Khabbab and Salim, the Mawla of Abu Hudhayfa. فمات ياسر وامرأته في العذاب وصبر الآخرون. And Yasir and his wife, they died from the torture. Those are the parents of Ammar. Ammar is the one who went to the Prophet and complained about what happened to him. So his mother and father died in the torture, and the others persevered. وفي رواية مجاهد عن ابن عباس عند ابن المنذر أن الصحابة لما هاجروا إلى المدينة. And in the narration of Mujahid from Ibn Abbas, according to Ibn al-Munzir, that the companions, when they migrated to Al-Madinah, أخذ المشركون خبابا وبلالا وعمارا. The pagans caught Khabbab and Bilal and Ammar. فأطاعهم عمار وأبى الآخرون فعذبوهما. And Ammar did what they wanted him to do, and the others refused. The other two refused, and the others refused, so they tortured them. Khabbab, Bilal, and Ammar, that's three of them. فَأَطَاعَهُمْ عَمَّارٌ. So Ammar, he did what they wanted him to do. Kufr. وَأَبَى الْآخَرُونَ. And the others refused. It says آخَرُون though, but there's only two left. فَعَذَّبُوهُمَا. So they tortured those two. وأخرجه الفاكهي من مرسل زيد بن أسلم. Al-Fakihi produced this hadith from the Mursal of Zayd ibn Aslam. Mursal means the intermediary between the Tabi'i, follower of the companion, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is missing. What that means is it's not a guarantee to be a companion. It's not a guarantee that the Tabi'i who is in the chain reporting directly from the Prophet heard what he's reporting from a Sahabi. It's not a condition. He could have heard it from another Tabi'i. That's the problem here. In fact, there could be up to 6 people between him and the Prophet, for example. It's possible. So that's called Mursal, when the Tabi'i is reporting directly from the Prophet. He never met the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. So who told him this hadith? It's not mentioned there. That's called Mursal. The intermediary between the Tabi'i and the Prophet is not mentioned. وأن ذلك وقع من عمار عند بيعة الأنصار في العقبة. And according to that report, this happened to Ammar when the Ansar paid allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at Al-Aqaba. وأن الكفار أخذوا عمارا. And in that report, it is that the disbelievers, they caught Ammar. فسألوه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And they asked him about the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. فجحدهم خبره. And he denied them the news of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. فأرادوا أن يعذبوه. So they wanted to torture him. فقال هو يكفر بمحمد وبما جاء به. And so he said that he disbelieves in Muhammad and what Muhammad came with. أي بعد أن أكرهوه على ذلك. Meaning he said that after they forced him to say it. أي على تلك المقالة. فأعجبهم. So they liked that. وأطلقوه. And they let him go. فجاء إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So he went to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. فذكر نحوه وفي سنده ضعف أيضا. And then he mentioned similar report. And in the chain of this report, there is some weakness also. وأخرج عبد بن حميد من طريق ابن سيرين. And Abd ibn Humayd, he produced from the route of Ibn Sirin, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لقي عمار بن ياسر. That the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم encountered Ammar ibn Yasir. وهو يبكي. And he was crying. فجعل يمسح الدموع عنه. So the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم started wiping the tears from him. ويقول أخذك المشركون. And he said to him, yani he told Ammar what happened. He told him, the pagans caught you. فَغَطَّوْكَ فِي الْمَاءِ حَتَّى قُلْتَ لَهُمْ كَذَا. And they suffocated you in water until you said to them such and such. حَتَّى قُلْتَ لَهُمْ كَذَا. Until you said such and such to them. إِنْ عَادُوا فَعُدْ. If they do it again. If they come back, then do it again. وَرِجَالُهُ ثِقَاتٌ مَعَ إِرْسَالِهِ أَيْضًا. And the men of this report are also trustworthy with this being a mursal report also. وَهَذِهِ الْمَرَاسِيلُ تَقْوَى بَعْضُهَا بِبَعْضٍ. And all of these mursal reports, they strengthen each other. They corroborate each other. So that means that with that intermediary missing between the Tabi'un and the Prophet, whatever Tabi'un are reporting this story without saying who's between them and the Prophet, since there are a number of these reports, and despite that gap there, otherwise everything else checks out, and some of them are weak, these are still corroborating reports. وقد أخرج ابن أبي حاتم من طريق مسلم الأعور وهو ضعيف. And Ibn Abi Hatim produced from the route of Muslim al-A'war وهو ضعيف, and he's a weak reporter. عن مجاهد عن ابن عباس, from the route of Mujahid from Ibn Abbas أنه قال, that he said, عذب المشركون عمارا. The pagans tortured Ammar. حتى قال لهم كلاما تقية. Until he said some talk to protect himself. فاشتد عليه. And then that was very burdensome on him. Yani, he couldn't take it that he said that. Al-Hadith, etc. to the end of that hadith. وقد أخرج الطبري من طريق علي بن أبي طلحة عن ابن عباس. And Al-Tabari produced from the route of Ali ibn Abi Talha from Ibn Abbas في قوله, about the ayah إلا من أكره وقلبه مطمئن بالإيمان, except whoever was compelled while his heart was firm with faith. What did Ibn Abbas say? قال أخبر الله أن من كفر بعد إيمانه فعليه غضب من الله. He said, Allah informed that anyone who disbelieved after being a believer, so that's apostasy, then he deserves the torture of Allah. وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ بِلِسَانِهِ. And but as for someone who was compelled to speak, وَخَالَفَهُ قَلْبُهُ بِالْإِيمَانِ, while his heart was against his tongue in faith, yani his heart had faith, and his tongue was compelled to utter what he didn't want, لِيَنْجُو, so that he would be safe, لِيَنْجُوَ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عَدُوِّهِ, so that he could escape from his enemy by that, فَلَا حَرَجَ عَلَيْهِ, then there is no sin on him. إِنَّ اللَّهَ إِنَّمَا يَأْخُذُ الْعِبَادَ بِمَا عَقَدَتْ عَلَيْهِ قُلُوبُهُمْ. Allah will only punish the slaves for what they did without being forced. It's not really literal translation there, but that's going to be the end. It's going to be what it means in the end. ونقل الحافظ اللغوي محمد مرتضى الزبيدي عن الإملاء على مشكلات الإحياء. The Hafiz and linguist Muhammad Murtada Zabidi, he documented in his book إتحاف السادة المتقين, which is an explanation of Ghazali's book إحياء علوم الدين. ومن كذب بقدرة الله تعالى وبما أوجد بها فقد كفر. Anyone who contradicted, who denied the power of God, exalted is he, and denied what God created by that power, then he has blasphemed. وَلَوْ لَمْ يَقْصِدِ الْكُفْرِ, even if he didn't intend blasphemy, فَإِنَّ أَكْثَرَ الْيَهُودِ وَالنَّصَارَى وَسَائِرَ النِّحَلِ مَا قَصَدَتِ الْكُفْرِ. For indeed, Jews, most Jews and Christians and the rest of the religions, they don't intend blasphemy. إلا بظنها بأنفسها وهي كفار بلا ريب. يعني, but they are disbelievers without doubt. وهذا وجه واضح قريب. This is a clear way that is practical. ولا يلتفت إلى ما مال إليه بعض من لا يعرف وجوه التأويل. And there's no consideration given to what some people inclined to, what some people, the way that some people took, some people who didn't know the ways of interpretation. They didn't know how to direct speech and interpret statements. ولا يعقل كلام أولي الحكم ولا الراسخين في العلم. Those who do not understand the speech of the wise ones, and they do not understand the speech of those who are firm in the knowledge. Wallahu a'lam. We'll stop there.